It was in the early spring of 1892, when London still lay under a damp shroud of mist and the lamps glowed weakly against the gathering dusk, that I was once more privileged to share in one of the most singular and audacious cases in the remarkable career of my friend Sherlock Holmes. I had not long returned from my rounds when a telegram awaited us at Baker Street, its foreign stamp and urgent scrawl instantly catching Holmes's hawk-like eye. He read it aloud with his characteristic calm, though I detected in the tightening of his lips the stirrings of deep interest. To Mr. Sherlock Holmes, an atrocious attempt has been made upon the life of a celebrated prima donna during rehearsal at the Paris Opera House. Circumstances defy all reason. Your immediate assistance is implored. Inspector Armand Fournier, Préfecture de Police. The telegram fell upon us like the opening chords of a symphony of dread. That an assassin should dare to strike at one of Europe's most renowned sopranos, and within the sanctum of the Palais Garnier itself, was a matter not only of scandal, but of international consequence. Holmes leaned back in his armchair, steepling his long fingers. A thin smile, almost sardonic, curved his lips. "Watson, my dear fellow," he said, "it appears that Paris has discovered what Scotland Yard has long known, that when logic falters, it is to Baker Street that the world must turn. Pack a valise, for we take the night train to Dover." I confess my medical instincts warred with my curiosity. "An assassination, Holmes. You speak of it as though it were a trifling puzzle." "On the contrary," he replied, rising with sudden energy. "The very boldness of the attempt excites my interest. Imagine, Watson, the opera house, with its labyrinth of corridors, its jealousies and rivalries, its gilded stage concealing more masks than the audience itself. No setting could be more apt for murder." And so, with scarcely an hour's preparation, I found myself swept along in Holmes's inexorable current. By midnight, we were rattling through the Channel crossing, the damp air heavy with salt spray, and by the following evening Paris greeted us with its restless boulevards and ever-watchful gaslight. Inspector Fournier received us at the Opera House, his face grave, his manner taut with suppressed agitation. The great building loomed above us, its marble facade gleaming beneath the lamps, but I could not help but feel a sinister shadow clung to its grandeur. Inside, the rehearsal stage lay deserted, save for a cluster of anxious figures. At their center sat the prima donna herself, pale and trembling, yet alive. The weapon, a single dart, tipped with some unidentifiable substance, had narrowly missed her throat, embedding itself instead in the velvet backdrop. Holmes examined it with the keenest attention, his eyes narrowing to slits as he held the slender missile to the light. "Fascinating," he murmured. "The hand that, through this, possesses precision beyond the common. This was no crude assault, Watson. This was the work of an artist, or of an assassin, trained as meticulously as any virtuoso upon this stage. And thus began our entanglement in what would prove one of the strangest, most perilous adventures of my association with Sherlock Holmes, and the case of the assassin in the Paris Opera House." The cavernous hall of the Opera House seemed almost haunted as Inspector Fournier led us toward the stage. The chandeliers above were unlit, and the gilt balconies looked down like solemn eyes upon the empty seats. Dust lingered in the air, mingled with the faint scent of oil and powder, and each footstep echoed with hollow resonance. Fournier was a man of middle years, gaunt of face and stern of manner. His uniform bore the insignia of the Préfecture, but his expression betrayed fatigue. "Monsieur Holmes," he said gravely, "you must understand that this theatre is not merely a house of music. It is a temple of French pride. A scandal here resonates throughout Europe. The mere rumor of an assassin stalking our stage has the power to bring ruin." Holmes inclined his head, his eyes roving ceaselessly across the space. "Your words are well chosen, Inspector. Few things rouse passion like art, and where passion burns, jealousy and hatred are seldom far behind. Pray, let us meet the victim." Seated in a velvet chair near the wings was a woman of striking beauty, though her pallor and trembling hands betrayed her distress. Raven dark hair framed a face of delicate features, and her large eyes, black as jet, shone with a mixture of fear and pride. Mademoiselle Celestine Durand, Fournier introduced softly, the jewel of our company. She owes her life, perhaps, to fortune alone. Holmes approached with a bow of rare courtesy. Mademoiselle, it is fortunate indeed that Providence turned the dart from its mark. If you can summon the strength to recount what befell, we may be better armed against your enemy. She pressed a hand to her throat as though still feeling the phantom sting. I sang as I have done 100 times, she murmured. The aria was beginning, the stage half dark, then suddenly I heard it, the hiss of something flying. I felt the rush of air upon my cheek. When I turned, the dart was quivering in the curtain behind me. 1 inch closer and I should be dead. Her voice trembled, and I confess a shiver ran down my spine at the thought. Holmes regarded her steadily. And you saw no hand? No shadow moving? Nothing, she whispered. Only darkness. Yet I felt eyes upon me, cold and intent as though some hidden presence willed me to fall. Holmes's expression hardened. A most curious attempt. The weapon was not fired in haste. It was aimed with the precision of a marksman. Inspector, I must know, who among this company bears her malice? Fournier sighed. Alas, monsieur, you ask what every theatre conceals. Rivalries abound. There is Madame Violette Lafontaine, once our brightest star, now eclipsed by Mademoiselle Durand. She hides her envy poorly. Then Henri Delacroix, our tenor. He professed passion for her, but she spurned him. His pride and temper are notorious, and there is the Comte de Vervain, her wealthy patron. She has resisted his jealous demands. Each of these, in their way, might wish her removed. Holmes closed his eyes briefly, his fingers steepled. A fruitful field, Inspector. But motive alone does not fire a dart so true. We must search for the hand as well as the heart. Even as Fournier spoke of jealousies, Holmes stooped suddenly, his magnifying glass in hand. He crawled upon the stage boards with complete disregard for dignity, his long fingers brushing the dust. At one place, just before the curtain, he paused. Here, Watson, he called softly. Do you see? I bent close, but discerned nothing beyond the scuff of boots. Holmes smiled faintly. That is because you look only for the obvious. Here is a faint groove, scarcely perceptible. The wood is grazed, not by a shoe, but by a narrow shaft, glancing as it struck. The dart entered at a downward angle. Curious, is it not? Then it was thrown from above? I asked. Possibly, but not certainly. We must not assume. Come, Inspector. Show me the galleries. We mounted the iron stair to the fly loft, high above the stage. The riggers, stout men with scarred hands, swore they had seen no intruder. Holmes questioned each minutely, where they stood, which ropes they handled, whether any shadow passed their sight. All denied it. Holmes examined the beams, scraped dust from a crossbar, and pocketed his glove without comment. From there we descended into the orchestra pit, deserted and forlorn. Holmes paced its length, kneeling here and there. A clear angle, he murmured. A missile from this position might well appear to descend upon the stage. But surely someone would have seen, I protested. Distraction, Watson, he replied quietly. When eyes are fixed upon a diver in song, a hand in shadow may move unseen. At last we descended into the cellars. Never have I felt a gloom more oppressive. The air was damp, the walls slick with moisture, the corridors winding like catacombs. Lantern light cast grotesque shadows that seemed to lure from every arch. Here lies the opera's true secret, Holmes said gravely. A labyrinth beneath splendour. Note these grates and vents. A man might observe unseen, even strike unseen if he knew these passages. Fournier crossed himself. There are legends, monsieur, of strange dwellers in these depths, outcasts who haunt the opera's bowels. I dismissed them as fables. Perhaps they are, Holmes answered. Yet every fable is born of some truth. We emerged at last into a vaulted chamber where black water pooled in an underground lagoon. Its still surface mirrored our lanterns like shards of glass. Holmes stood silent for some moments, then turned briskly. Enough for tonight. Watson, the building is a labyrinth, but it has given me notes to add to the score. We shall retire, and tomorrow I must examine these plans more closely. That evening, in our lodgings overlooking the Place de l'Opéra, Holmes spread the steward's architectural drawings upon the table. Cigarette smoke curled around him as he traced the lines of stage, pit, and cellar with his forefinger. "Observe," he said, "how the curtain aligns with this vent. See how the rake of the stage alters the geometry. A dart from below might seem to fall from above." Fascinating. I frowned, trying to follow. "Then the assassin came from beneath." "Perhaps," Holmes said softly, his eyes gleaming. "Perhaps not. It is the inconsistency that intrigues me, Watson. But patience. The overture is not yet done. Tomorrow may bring us to the first crescendo." I lay awake long after, haunted by the image of the dart quivering in the velvet curtain and the pale singer trembling in her chair. Somewhere within that great edifice of marble and gold lurked a hand both skilled and ruthless, and I could not escape the feeling that we had only glimpsed the opening bars of a much darker symphony. The following morning broke damp and grey, a pale drizzle veiling the boulevards. Yet Holmes was already astir, his lean figure bent over the architectural plans spread across our table. Cigarette ash lay scattered like snowdrifts about the paper, and his eyes gleamed with the peculiar brilliance that meant his mind was alight with discovery. "Watson," he said without preamble, "the opera is a labyrinth. Its splendor above conceals a network of passages, vents, and trapdoors that would confound all but the most intimate of guides. Our adversary counts upon that ignorance. We must examine it by daylight, when shadows cannot so easily deceive." Thus, after a hurried breakfast, we returned to the Palais Garnier. The great building loomed even more formidable in the morning mist, its marble statues weeping with rain, its bronze doors glistening darkly. Inside, the stage lay deserted save for a few nervous workers. Inspector Fournier, weary but resolute, awaited us. "Messieurs," he said grimly, "my men kept vigil all night. We found no intruder, yet whispers grow. The chorus girls mutter of ghosts. The stagehands cross themselves when they pass the curtain. If this continues, panic will ruin us before any assassin does." Holmes gave him a thin smile. "Then let us replace superstition with observation, Inspector. Show me once more the stage." We mounted the boards, the velvet curtain looming like a silent witness. Holmes crouched where the dart had struck, his magnifying glass in hand. "See, Watson, the graze upon the wood is clearer now by daylight. Downward, yes, but subtle, as though the hand that cast it exploited an angle, invisible to the casual eye." I bent close, but though I strained, I could discern only faint scratches. Holmes rose, dusting his knees. His gaze lifted to the dizzying height of the fly gallery. "Come, we must not neglect any vantage." We ascended the iron stair, its steps echoing hollow beneath our boots. From the gallery, the stage appeared no larger than a rug, the curtain a strip of crimson cloth. A foreman of the riggers, a burly man with arms like rope, swore again that none but his crew had been aloft. "We watched, monsieur," he insisted. "Every beam, every rope. There was no stranger." Holmes questioned him sharply. How many men, what positions, whether any left their post, what angle each might see? The man answered stoutly, yet Holmes's lips curved faintly as though the very certainty of his denial intrigued him more than doubt would have done. He scraped dust from a crossbeam with his gloved hand, sniffed at the smear upon his finger, and pocketed the glove without explanation. Then, With no further word, he descended. In the orchestra pit, he lingered long, pacing its edge, kneeling at intervals, measuring distances with his eye. "Note this, Watson," he said softly. "From here, a missile aimed upward might appear to descend, thanks to the rake of the stage. Perception deceives the inattentive." "Then the assassin may have stood here, beneath the noses of all?" I asked. "Perhaps. Distraction is the ally of crime. When every gaze is fixed upon the prima donna's song, who marks a shadow moving among empty chairs?" At last we turned once more to the cellars. I confess my heart sank as the lanterns guttered in the damp air, and the vaulted corridors stretched ahead, dripping with moisture. The gloom was thick as a fog, the stones slick underfoot. Fournier muttered uneasily. "There are those who swear the opera is haunted, that strange dwellers move unseen in these vaults." I dismissed such talk. Yet after last night, who can say? Holmes's eyes gleamed in the lantern light. "Fables often spring from forgotten truths, Inspector. A man who knows these ways may seem a phantom to those who do not." We passed doors bolted with rust, heaps of discarded scenery, props decayed and mouldering. At one corner, Holmes stooped, plucking a fragment of silk from a splinter. He turned it in the lamplight, a scrap of black cloth, jaggedly torn. Without comment, he slipped it into his pocket. Further on, we entered a vast chamber where stagnant water formed a black lagoon. The reflections of our lanterns shivered upon its surface like broken glass. Holmes stood very still, his profile carved in shadow, as though listening to some inner music inaudible to us. Then he turned briskly. "Enough. I've seen what I wished. Inspector, keep your men steady but discreet. The assassin will strike again, of that I am certain. But each attempt leaves a trace, and soon the pattern will be complete." We returned above, where workers prepared the stage for rehearsal. Mademoiselle Durand appeared, pale yet determined, her voice faint but steady as she greeted us. "Messieurs, I will not surrender to fear. If my enemy waits in the shadows, let him see I do not falter." Her courage stirred my admiration, though I noted Holmes regarded her less with sympathy than with cold calculation, as though she were both victim and bait. That evening, in our lodgings, he spread the drawings once more across the table. A cigarette burned low between his fingers as he traced the lines of trapdoor, vent, and passage. Suddenly, he tapped the paper with a sharp motion. "Observe, Watson. The curtain, the vent, the rake of the stage. They form a triangle of opportunity. The dart could have come from below, not above. The illusion of descent was deliberate. A mind contrived it with precision." I stared at the plans, bewildered. "Then the assassin is in the cellars." "Perhaps. Or perhaps he merely wished us to think so. The hand we seek is cunning. He plays not only with weapons, but with perception itself." He rose, pacing the room, his eyes aglow with that inner fire. "This Watson is no ordinary foe. He is artist as much as criminal, and his canvas is this opera house. But every artist leaves a signature, however faint. I shall find it." I confess a shiver passed through me at his words. Somewhere in that labyrinth of marble and shadow lurked a hand skilled enough to kill without being seen, cunning enough to mislead even seasoned eyes. Yet Holmes, with his unerring logic, already pursued the faint traces of a truth I could not yet perceive. The days that followed were heavy with unease. Rehearsals continued beneath the shadow of menace, every note sung by Mademoiselle Durand carrying with it a tremor of dread. Fournier had stationed plainclothes men in the wings, but their presence did little to allay suspicion. The singers whispered in corners, the chorus crossed themselves at every creak of the rafters, and the stage hands muttered of phantoms in the galleries. It was on the second afternoon of our investigation that Fournier summoned us to his office with visible agitation. Upon the desk lay a small lacquered case, its lid thrown open to reveal a row of slender steel darts, near identical to the one that had quivered in the velvet curtain. "They were found hidden among the belongings of Henri Delacroix," Fournier announced grimly, "concealed behind a pile of sheet music in his dressing room. The man's guilt is beyond doubt." Holmes lifted one of the darts delicately, balancing it upon his long fingers. He examined its shaft, its symmetry, its steel tip, then replaced it in the case with a faint smile. "A damning discovery indeed, Inspector," he said softly. "And yet perhaps a little too damning." Fournier frowned. "How so?" "The man has the motive. His passion for Mademoiselle Durand is notorious, and her scorn is no secret. His debts are heavy, his temper violent. Now we find the very weapons. What more do you require?" "Proof, Inspector," Holmes replied. "Not proof contrived for our benefit, but proof born of nature. Consider, an assassin skilled enough to cast such a missile with unerring aim, clever enough to exploit the architecture of this house, would he then hide his arsenal carelessly in his own chamber? No. To do so is to invite discovery. This is theatre, Inspector, and I distrust theatre when it intrudes upon truth." A short while later, we were granted an interview with the accused tenor himself. Henri Delacroix swept into the chamber with all the passion of his art, his dark eyes flashing, his voice vibrating with outrage. "Messieurs," he cried, "I am dragged before you like a criminal, accused of a crime too base for my contempt. Yes, I quarreled with Celestine. Yes, she spurned me. But to kill her, to destroy the very partner of my song, it is madness. A singer without his prima donna is as a bird without its wings." Fournier's lips thinned. "And these?" He thrust the case before him. Delacroix stared at the darts in bewilderment, then raised his hands in protest. "I have never seen them before in my life. Someone has placed them there to ruin me." Holmes studied him keenly. "On the morning of the attempt, where precisely did you stand, monsieur?" "At the left wing, awaiting my cue. Ask the chorus. Several saw me." "And you did not approach the curtain?" "Never." The tenor's voice rang with such fervor that even I felt doubt creep into my certainty. His passion, his indignation seemed unfeigned. Holmes turned away at last. "Inspector, I urge restraint. Keep your watch upon him, but do not confine him. The bird we hunt is clever, and he delights in luring others into his snare. Let us not reward him by leaping where he would have us fall." Fournier muttered angrily, but yielded to Holmes's authority. Delacroix stormed from the chamber, his dignity wounded, but his protestations still echoing in our ears. As we stepped into the corridor, a tall figure swept toward us, her jewels flashing, her powdered hair set high in the fashion of an earlier age. Madame Violette Lafontaine carried herself with the hauteur of one who had once commanded adoration and now endured eclipse. Her eyes glittered with disdain as she addressed us. "So, the great Mademoiselle Durand trembles, and Paris trembles with her. A dart, a whisper, a shadow, and the opera is thrown into chaos. Perhaps if she had shown more modesty, she would not now find herself the target of daggers." Her words dripped venom, and though she smiled, the malice beneath was plain. Holmes inclined his head politely. "You suggest, madame, that Mademoiselle Durand has enemies of her own making." "Enemies?" Lafontaine laughed bitterly. "She creates them daily with her arrogance. Do not look to me, monsieur. I need no assassin's weapon. Time itself will silence her voice soon enough. But mark me, not all at the opera rejoice in her triumphs." She swept past us with the dignity of a queen, though the bitterness in her tone lingered long after her departure. Holmes's eyes followed her thoughtfully. "A curious performance, Watson. Too well staged. One must ask, was it true malice we heard, or a mask donned for our benefit?" That evening, rehearsal commenced as though nothing had occurred. The chandeliers blazed, the orchestra struck its chords, and Durand sang bravely, though her voice trembled. Delacroix performed beside her with stormy intensity, his face clouded with resentment. La Fontaine, in the shadows, delivered her contralto with chilling poise. I watched them all, my heart divided between sympathy and suspicion. The scene upon the stage was one of love and betrayal, yet the greater drama lurked behind the curtain, unseen but felt. Holmes sat motionless beside me, his keen gaze darting from pit to gallery, from wing to stage. At last he leaned toward me, his voice a whisper. "Do you not feel it, Watson? The air itself vibrates with deception. Delacroix protests too passionately, La Fontaine spits her venom too readily. They play their parts for us, but the true drama, the one we must unravel, moves behind the scenes. That, my friend, is where the assassin waits." I shivered, for though no dart flew that evening, the sense of menace was palpable. Somewhere among those voices, those glances, those jealousies, lurked the hand that had aimed to kill. And though Fournier clung to his belief in Delacroix's guilt, I could see in Holmes's eyes that he already sought the shadow behind the shadow. The morning after rehearsal found Holmes in one of his most restless moods. He paced the length of our modest rooms near the Place de l'Opéra, his dressing gown flaring at each turn, cigarette smoke trailing like spectral ribbons behind him. I'd long since learned that such agitation was the outward expression of inward precision. Every stride, every muttered phrase was but a step in the march of his deductions. "Watson," he said suddenly, halting by the window, "when is coincidence not coincidence?" I closed my notebook, weary from chasing his abstractions. "When it is contrived, I suppose." Just so. Delacroix's supposed guilt is painted in strokes too bold, too visible. The darts in his room, the quarrels known to all, the debts spoken of by every chorus member, each detail falls into place with theatrical neatness. It is as though some unseen hand has painted his portrait for us, inviting our admiration. Yet artifice is often betrayed by overconfidence. A brush-stroke lies crooked. He tapped his long fingers upon the sill, eyes glinting. "I glimpsed that crooked stroke last night." I leaned forward. "What was it, Holmes?" But he waved me off with sudden irritation. "Patience, my dear fellow. The proof is not yet ripe. Were I to name the assassin now, you would call it mere conjecture. No, the truth must be drawn into daylight, so clear that even our good Inspector Fournier cannot deny it." At that moment, a knock sounded at the door. Fournier entered, his face pale with strain. He held a folded paper, which he flung upon the table with a muttered oath. "See, monsieur. Another note, slipped beneath the door of Mademoiselle Durand's dressing room during the night." Holmes unfolded the sheet, his eyes darting rapidly across the scrawled words. "Sing once more, Nightingale, and your last note shall be silence." Holmes read it twice, then passed it to me without comment. The letters were bold, almost theatrical in their flourish, but curiously inconsistent in their pressure, as though the hand had disguised its natural flow. Fournier's fist clenched. "This is enough. I shall arrest Delacroix before another outrage occurs." But Holmes shook his head firmly. "No, Inspector. To act now is to spring the trap laid for you. Whoever wrote this note has mastered the art of misdirection. Mark me well, if you seize the tenor, the true assassin will laugh in his shadowed lair." Fournier swore beneath his breath, but he yielded. His respect for Holmes, though reluctant, grew daily. That afternoon, Holmes led me once more into the bowels of the opera. We carried lanterns, their weak glow illuminating stone corridors slick with damp. The distant drip of water echoed like the tolling of a clock. "Do you not feel it, Watson?" Holmes murmured. "The very air hums with secrecy. These passages conceal more than dust and mold." At a junction he paused, crouched, and examined the stone floor. His lantern revealed faint smears of black upon the surface. He touched them lightly, then brought his fingers to his nose. "Grease," he whispered. stage grease, such as singers use upon their faces, and here the impression of a shoe, narrow and pointed. A woman's shoe, Watson, not a man's. I stared at him in astonishment. You mean... He raised a finger sharply. Hush! I've said too much already. He pocketed the scrap of evidence and moved swiftly on. In a side chamber filled with discarded scenery, Holmes examined every corner with meticulous care. He stooped to the floor and drew forth a sliver of broken wood wedged in a vent. Interesting. This matches the rib of a fan, he murmured. He slipped it into his pocket, his face alight with suppressed excitement. At last we emerged into the light of day, the rain-slicked boulevard before us. Holmes strode swiftly, his every movement taut with suppressed energy. The pattern strengthens, Watson. The dart, the vapor, the planted evidence, all variations upon a theme. Our adversary is cunning, but he cannot compose without leaving a discordant note. I have it now, yet still the finale awaits. That evening we attended rehearsal once more. The chandeliers blazed, the orchestra tuned, and Mademoiselle Durand appeared in her gown of white satin. She sang with courage, though her voice wavered with strain. Delacroix stood beside her, his face dark with passion, while La Fontaine lurked at the rear, her contralto voice resonant, her gaze sharp as a blade. Holmes sat motionless, yet I could feel the tension radiating from him. His eyes darted ceaselessly, his hands steepled, his mind like a spring coiled tight. When the aria ended, applause rang hollow in the empty hall. Durand bowed faintly, then retired to her chamber. Holmes touched my arm. Come, Watson, it is time we observed more closely. We followed her, Fournier at our side. In the dressing-room, Durand sank into a chair, her maid fluttering about her with anxious hands. Holmes's gaze swept the room, lingering upon the doorframe. He stepped closer, running his finger along the wood. A faint groove, almost invisible, marked the surface. Curious, he murmured. A thread was tied here, recently cut, likely used to convey some message or token beneath the door. He turned, his eyes gleaming. The assassin is bold, Watson, bold enough to toy with us under our very noses. Durand clutched her throat, her eyes wide. Monsieur Holmes, I am lost. He will strike again, I feel it. Already I hear his voice in the dark. Holmes regarded her with rare gentleness. Courage, mademoiselle. The shadow hunts you, yes, but shadows flee before the light. Trust that the hand which threatens shall soon be revealed. As we left her chamber, Fournier muttered, You speak with such certainty, monsieur. Yet who is it? Tell me. But Holmes merely smiled, that faint, sardonic curve of the lips I had come to know so well. All in good time, Inspector. Music played too soon spoils the harmony. Let the overture finish. The finale approaches. That night, as we returned to our lodgings, Holmes was silent, his mind clearly racing. Only when we had reached our door did he pause and speak in that quiet, measured tone that always set my nerves on edge. Watson, we are upon the verge. The assassin has revealed more than he knows. One more attempt, and the melody shall resolve. He would say no more, and though I pressed him, he remained resolutely silent. I retired with my mind in tumult, haunted by images of dart, vapor, and silk, and by Holmes's cryptic certainty that the assassin's mask was already slipping. The following evening was marked by unusual pomp. Word had spread that the President of the Republic himself would attend the gala, along with several foreign dignitaries. Carriages rattled down the boulevards in endless procession, depositing their jeweled occupants before the gilded steps of the Palais Garnier. To the world, it was a night of splendor. To Holmes and me, it was the stage for a crime, yet unfinished. Inside, the opera blazed with light. The chandeliers glittered, the velvet seats filled with nobles and patrons, yet beneath the sheen of satin and diamonds, I could sense a current of fear. Every whisper carried speculation of phantoms and poison. Every glance darted nervously toward the stage. Fournier met us in the grand foyer, his mustache bristling with anxiety. "The house is guarded from cellar to roof," he assured us. "No intruder can enter tonight." Holmes regarded him coolly. "It is not the intruder without, Inspector, but the hand within that concerns me." We took our seats in a discreet box with a clear view of stage and audience alike. Holmes leaned forward, every nerve taut, his keen eyes scanning the galleries and wings. I confess my heart pounded, for I could not rid myself of the image of Célestin Durand struck down before the multitude. The curtain rose. Music swelled, voices soared, and for a time the grandeur of the performance held the audience rapt. Durand sang with a radiance that belied her pallor, her voice filling the house with unearthly beauty. Delacroix thundered beside her, his gaze burning with stormy passion. In the shadows, La Fontaine's contralto wove a darker thread, her eyes glinting with something that might have been envy or triumph. Holmes touched my arm lightly. "Mark every gesture, Watson. The drama behind the curtain eclipses the one upon it." It was during the second act, as Durand began her aria, that calamity struck once more. Her voice rang out pure and strong, then faltered suddenly. She clutched at her throat, her face contorting in pain. A gasp rippled through the hall. Delacroix caught her by the arm as she staggered, his own features blanching. The orchestra halted in confusion, the audience erupting in cries of alarm. Holmes was on his feet in an instant. "Quickly, Watson!" We rushed to the wings where Durand had collapsed into a chair. Her hand pressed against her neck, and upon her delicate skin a red welt had risen, angry and inflamed. Her breathing came in ragged gasps. Holmes bent swiftly, his nostrils flaring as he sniffed the air. "Bitter almonds," he muttered. "Do you not perceive it, Watson? Cyanide, or a relative thereof. The very air has been tainted." I sniffed desperately, but detected only the mingled odors of dust, perfume, and oil. Holmes turned to Fournier, who had arrived white with shock. "Ventilate at once. Open the trap-doors, the wings, the drafts. The assassin has loosed vapor from some hidden source." Orders were shouted. Stagehands flung open vents and trap-doors. Fresh air rushed in, and Durand's breathing began to ease. She leaned back, pale and trembling, her voice reduced to a hoarse whisper, yet alive. Holmes straightened, his face set like steel. "Twice he has struck, Inspector, each time with a different weapon. This is no ordinary foe. He is versatile, relentless, and determined to finish what he began." Meanwhile, pandemonium spread among the audience. Ladies screamed, gentlemen shouted for order. Whispers of anarchists, assassins, and phantoms flew like sparks. Fournier did his best to calm the Archadi dignitaries, assuring them the danger was past. Holmes drew me aside. His eyes glowed with inward fire. "Do you not see, Watson? The dart, the vapor, they are not random. They are variations on a single theme composed for our benefit. The assassin plays with method, but the melody beneath is constant. He seeks not merely to kill, but to deceive." I stared at him in bewilderment. "But why change weapons? Why not repeat what nearly succeeded before?" "Because, my dear fellow, he seeks to appear as phantom, as chaos itself, but order hides beneath the seeming disorder. I have begun to hear the true music." He would say no more. The performance, resumed with difficulty, concluded to muted applause. The audience dispersed in fearful clusters, the glitter of jewels dulled by whispers of death. Behind the curtain, chaos reigned, singers quarreling, stagehands muttering of shadows, Fournier's men scouring every vent and passage. Holmes moved among them with quiet authority. Beneath the stage he stooped, reaching into a vent. He drew forth a small vial, its contents nearly spent. He held it to the lamplight with grim satisfaction. A crude but deadly device. Heated, it released vapor through the grates above. Ingenious, yet it betrays the hand that placed it. Not every singer knows the underworks of the opera, but one who has trod these passages for years, one who has seen the opera from crown to cellar, would know. Fournier swore violently. Then it is Delacroix. Who else has such access? Holmes's eyes narrowed. Access is nothing without knowledge, Inspector. Ask yourself, who combines both knowledge of these depths and motive enough to wield it? That is the figure we seek. As we emerged into the misty night, Paris seemed hushed, as though awaiting the next act of a tragedy. Holmes strode swiftly, his coat flaring behind him, his face alive with fierce concentration. "Watson," he said abruptly, "this is no longer a matter of jealousy alone. The hand behind this has larger purpose. Twice the weapon changed, yet the end remained constant. The question we must ask is not who envies Mademoiselle Durand, but who profits by her fall, and why in so public, so theatrical a fashion." I ventured timidly. Perhaps to ruin the opera itself, to cast shame upon France before her guests. Holmes smiled faintly. "An excellent hypothesis, my dear fellow. Hold it fast. The play grows darker, and soon the final act must commence." The events of that gala night left Paris in uproar. By morning, the boulevards were filled with gossip, newspapers blazed with speculation, and the opera house trembled beneath the weight of scandal. Some whispered of anarchists, others of vengeful phantoms, still others accused Henri Delacroix openly, convinced that jealousy had driven him to madness. Fournier summoned us to his office before noon, his desk buried under papers, his eyes red from sleepless hours. "I can hold the tide no longer," he declared. "If I do not act, my superiors will arrest Delacroix and proclaim the matter closed. The city demands a culprit." Holmes seated himself with unruffled calm, though his eyes burned with quiet intensity. "Then the assassin shall have won, Inspector. For nothing would please him more than to see Delacroix condemned. No, this case cannot be ended with a scapegoat. It must end with truth." "And how, pray, shall you find it?" Fournier demanded bitterly. Holmes leaned forward, his long fingers steepled. "By compelling the assassin to reveal himself. He has struck twice. He must strike again, for his pride will not endure failure. Then, Inspector, we shall be ready." Fournier shook his head. "You mean to wait until another attempt is made? Must more lives be risked?" "Not lives," Holmes replied. "Only shadows. For the next attempt, the assassin will strike at what he believes to be Mademoiselle Durand. In truth, it shall be myself." I could not restrain my cry of alarm. "Holmes, this is madness. To stand in her place. Do you mean to invite death?" He turned to me, his expression softened by a trace of amusement. "Not death, Watson, but revelation. The assassin depends upon darkness, upon surprise. Let him strike, and he shall find the prey prepared." Fournier stared, then gave a bark of incredulous laughter. You in a gown, monsieur. Forgive me, but—" "Laugh if you will," Holmes cut in dryly. "A wig, a veil, a gown, at distance and by dim light they suffice. My purpose is not to sing an aria, but to lure a hand from the shadows. Do you consent, Inspector?" Reluctantly, Fournier agreed, though I could see he feared scandal even more than Holmes feared risk. The arrangements were set. The following night, the opera would stage a rehearsal for lighting adjustments. In truth, it would be a trap. That evening, Holmes disappeared for several hours, returning near midnight with parcels tucked beneath his arm. He spread them across the table, wigs, lace, powder, and a gown of white satin borrowed discreetly from the wardrobe mistress. With astonishing skill, he altered his angular features, softened the line of his jaw, and cloaked his figure in folds of silk. In the dim lamplight, he might indeed have been mistaken for Celestine Durand herself. I stared in mingled horror and admiration. Holmes? The likeness is uncanny. But what if he aims true? Holmes smiled faintly, producing a narrow board concealed within the gown. A singer's bosom may be delicate, Watson, but mine shall prove harder than steel. The following night, the trap was sprung. The opera stood dark, save for a single lamp upon the stage, casting a pale circle of light. Holmes stepped into it, clad in satin and wig, humming softly a phrase of Durand's aria. In the shadows, Fournier's men crouched unseen, every nerve strained. I kept close to Holmes, my revolver at hand, my heart hammering. Minutes dragged in dreadful silence. The creak of ropes overhead, the faint drip of water below, each sound seemed magnified 100-fold. Holmes moved with studied grace, his voice humming like a bird in the dark. Then it came, a faint hiss, the whisper of air displaced. Holmes stiffened, his arm flicked upward, and a dart quivered harmlessly against the hidden board beneath his gown. "Now," he cried. Lanterns flared, shouts erupted. A figure detached itself from the wings, fleeing with desperate swiftness toward the trap door leading below. Fournier's men surged forward, but the fugitive slipped through like smoke, boots ringing on the iron stairs. Holmes tore away wig and gown, springing after him with astonishing speed. "Watson, this way!" We plunged into the labyrinthine cellars, lanterns bobbing wildly, shouts echoing from stone. The fugitive ran like a creature born of darkness, twisting and vanishing into passage after passage. Twice we thought to catch him, only to find emptiness. At last we burst into the vast chamber of the underground lake, its black surface shimmering faintly. There he was, already in a skiff, pushing off with a pole. His cloaked figure stood outlined in the lamplight for an instant before slipping into the shadows. "Stop him!" Fournier roared, his men rushing to the banks. But the assassin moved with the swiftness of desperation. Holmes raised a hand sharply. "No, let him go." Fournier wheeled on him in fury. "Are you mad? He escapes." Holmes' eyes gleamed. "No, Inspector. He believes he escapes. In truth, he rose into a cage. There is but one exit from this lake, and I placed your men there hours ago. He cannot leave without passing their lanterns." Even as he spoke, cries rang from the far passage. Lanterns flaring, the skiff veered wildly, its occupant twisting in panic. He flung a vial into the water. It shattered with a hiss, a sickly odor spreading. The surface bubbled, the skiff rocked. Then, with a cry half of rage, half of despair, the figure hurled himself into the black waters. We waited breathless, lanterns straining against the dark. Ripples spread, then stilled. The waters closed over him, silent once more. "He is drowned," Fournier muttered grimly. "The phantom is ended." But Holmes stood rigid, his eyes fixed upon the lake. At last he spoke, his voice low, certain. "No, Inspector, he is not drowned. There are recesses beneath those waters, passages known to him alone. He has slipped us for the moment. Yet his mask is already torn. The next time we meet, it shall be in daylight, and his identity plain." We returned above, weary and shaken. The opera house lay in silence, its lamps extinguished, its splendor muted by fear. Holmes strode swiftly, his face pale but alight with fierce determination. "The snare was sprung, Watson," he said at last, "though the bird eluded us. Still, I have seen enough. The discordant note grows louder. Soon the melody will resolve, and the assassin's name shall stand revealed." Paris awoke the next morning buzzing with rumors of the phantom assassin. Every cafe and newspaper kiosk hummed with speculation, and the opera itself seemed to groan under the burden of whispers. The assassin had slipped once more into the shadows, and the city, starved of certainty, seized upon gossip like starving men upon bread. Holmes, however, remained as taut and controlled as a violin string. He refused breakfast, instead pacing our rooms with his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze inward. At last he spoke, as if continuing a conversation begun in silence. "Watson, our adversary has played his hand too boldly. Twice he struck unseen, but last night he revealed himself in the act of flight. I marked him. More than that, I marked the flaw no disguise can conceal." I leaned forward eagerly. "You recognized him?" Holmes' lips curved in a faint smile. "I recognized enough, but suspicion is not proof. The time has come to draw the threads into a net so tight that even the cleverest hand cannot wriggle free." He would say no more, and though my questions pressed, he merely busied himself with the opera's plans, muttering of angles, vents, and sight lines. By midday, we returned once more to the Palais Garnier. Fournier greeted us with an expression of barely suppressed desperation. "My superiors demand results," he confessed. "They will not wait. If I cannot name the culprit, they will seize Delacroix and be done with it." Holmes' eyes flashed. "Then you will hand the assassin his greatest triumph." "No, Inspector. We must stage one more act. Tonight the house must believe itself safe. Tomorrow the assassin will believe himself victorious, and in that very moment he shall stand revealed." Fournier groaned, but submitted. He had seen enough of Holmes's precision to trust where his reason faltered. Holmes then demanded a private interview with the principals. In the manager's office that afternoon we assembled. Henri Delacroix, pale with rage and humiliation, Madame Lafontaine, her hauteur unshaken, and Mademoiselle Durand, fragile yet resolute. Holmes stood before them, his lean figure commanding despite the modest chamber. He regarded each in turn with eyes that seemed to strip away pretense. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said evenly, "you have all been touched by this crime. One of you has been hunted, one has been framed, and one has shown too much venom to be dismissed. But let us be clear, the assassin is still among us. He will strike again, and soon. I intend to see that he does not succeed." Delacroix sprang up with stormy passion. "I am weary of suspicion. If you believe me guilty, arrest me. If not, let me sing in peace." Holmes raised a hand. "Calm yourself, monsieur. The guilty man or woman is not always he upon whom suspicion most conveniently falls." Lafontaine gave a bitter laugh. "Fine words, monsieur, but every whisper in Paris names Delacroix. He has the motive, the temper, the opportunity. Who else would dare?" Durand, pale and trembling, pressed her hands together. "Please," she whispered, "I beg you, do not quarrel. Already I dread the shadows. If he strikes again, I cannot—" Her words faltered, tears brimming in her eyes. Holmes' gaze softened briefly, but he spoke with quiet firmness. "Courage, mademoiselle. You are not alone. Trust me a little longer, and the hand that hunts you will reveal itself." He dismissed them shortly after, though I saw that he watched their faces intently as they departed. Only when we were alone did I ask, "Holmes, you speak as though you already know." His eyes gleamed. "I know enough, but knowledge unproved is no better than suspicion. The assassin must unmask himself before witnesses, and he shall. One discordant note in the symphony has already betrayed him." That evening, Holmes prowled the opera like a shadow. He examined dressing rooms, ran his finger along door frames, and tapped floorboards with his cane. In Lafontaine's chamber, he paused over a discarded fan, one rib broken clean. He pocketed it with a faint smile. In Delacroix's room, he stooped by the mirror, examining the dust beneath with delicate care. In Durand's chamber, he knelt at the threshold, brushing at the faint groove he had remarked before. "Each room sings its own note, Watson," he murmured. "Together they form a chord. Tomorrow you shall hear the harmony complete." I pressed him, but he merely lit a cigarette and stared into the smoke. "Patience, Watson. The assassin has composed his drama. Let him play it to the end. Then the house shall hear a different aria, one of truth." That night I lay sleepless, turning over each face in my mind. Delacroix, proud and tempestuous; Lafontaine, bitter and cold; Durand, pale and hunted. Each seemed capable, each had cause. And yet Holmes's certainty haunted me, his insistence that the truth was already plain. When morning came, the opera prepared for its next performance, though dread hung heavy upon it. Workers whispered of abandoning their posts. Choristers crossed themselves at every cue. Yet Holmes moved among them with quiet assurance, speaking little, his eyes alight. As we left the house to snatch a brief meal, he turned to me with sudden intensity. "Watson, steel yourself. Tonight will be decisive. The assassin must strike, for he has bound himself to finish what he began, and when he does, the phantom shall become flesh, and the truth shall stand naked." The evening of the performance arrived with a sense of dread disguised as splendor. Once more the carriages lined the Boulevard des Capucines, their lamps glimmering in the damp Parisian air. Once more the opera's marble facade blazed with light, its angels gleaming against the night sky. But beneath the jewels and silks of the arriving audience there ran a tremor of unease, for the whisper of the phantom assassin had spread from café to salon. Inspector Fournier met us at the entrance, his face pale and set. "This is my last chance, monsieur," he muttered to Holmes. "If calamity strikes again, the opera will be ruined, and I with it. My men are everywhere, roof, gallery, pit, and cellar. If he shows himself, he will not escape this time." Holmes's expression was unreadable. "The assassin will not resist the temptation, Inspector. Pride compels him. Tonight he will play his final note. Let your men wait, but unseen. A single premature movement will ruin all." We took our seats in a discreet side box, with a clear view of stage and galleries. Holmes leaned forward, his hawk-like profile etched against the glow of the chandeliers, every nerve alive with expectation. For my part, I confess my pulse quickened with dread. I could not shake the fear that Celestine Durand might fall before the multitude, her voice silenced forever in a single instant. The performance began. The orchestra thundered, the chorus rose, the stage blazed with color and light. Durand entered, pale yet radiant, her voice soaring above the music. Delacroix sang beside her with stormy passion, his gaze fixed upon her with an intensity that might have been love or hatred. In the shadows, Madame La Fontaine's contralto wove its brooding line, her eyes cold and glittering. Holmes leaned toward me, whispering, "Mark every motion, Watson. The overture is complete. The cadenza approaches." It was during Durand's great aria in the second act that the moment came. The hall fell into rapt silence, her voice filling the vast chamber with unearthly beauty. Then, without warning, Holmes stiffened. His eyes darted upward to the left gallery. "Watson, there!" he hissed. I followed his gaze. A shadow moved, an arm raised swiftly, a slender tube glinting in the lamplight. A flash of steel, a dart hurtling through the air, straight for Durand's breasts. Holmes sprang from our box with astonishing agility. He vaulted to the aisle below, and in the same instant flung his weighted cane. It struck the backdrop with a sharp crack, jerking it sideways. The dart quivered harmlessly in the folds of velvet. The audience erupted in shrieks. Ladies screamed, men shouted. The orchestra collapsed in discordant chaos. Durand gave a cry and staggered back, Delacroix catching her in his arms, his face ashen. "Seize him!" roared Fournier. His men rushed the gallery, lanterns flaring. The assassin, a cloaked figure, leapt to his feet and darted along the beam with the swiftness of a cat. He dropped to a lower balcony, then vanished toward the stairwell. Holmes was after him like lightning, forcing his way through the panicked throng. I followed, my heart hammering, as we plunged into the warren of passages beneath the opera. Boots thundered, shouts echoed, lantern light swung wildly. The fugitive twisted left and right with uncanny swiftness, vanishing at corners, only to reappear in the distance. At last, we burst into the great chamber of the underground lake. The assassin had already reached the far bank. where a skiff lay moored. With a thrust of the pole, he pushed off, his cloaked figure standing tall for an instant in the lamplight before receding into darkness. Fournier cursed violently. "He escapes again!" Holmes raised his hand sharply. "No, Inspector. He believes he escapes. In truth, he rose into a cage of his own making. The lake is a cul-de-sac. I placed your men at the only exit. He cannot pass them unseen." Even as he spoke, shouts rang out from the far passage, lanterns flaring. The skiff veered wildly, the assassin twisting to turn back. More lights appeared behind him, hemming him in. The trap had sprung. Cornered, the figure raised an arm and hurled something into the water. A vial shattered with a hiss, releasing a sickly odor. The black surface bubbled. Men drew back in alarm, fearful of poison. The skiff rocked violently. Then, with a cry half of rage, half of despair, the assassin leapt into the black waters. For an instant, the ripples spread, glimmering in our lantern light. Then they stilled. The lake lay silent once more, its surface smooth as glass. "He is drowned," Fournier said hoarsely. "The phantom is ended." But Holmes's gaze remained fixed upon the water, his face pale, his eyes alight with cold certainty. "No, Inspector, he is not drowned. These waters conceal recesses, passages known to him alone. He has slipped us for the moment, but it matters little. I have all I need. The mask is already torn. Tomorrow, in daylight, the assassin shall stand revealed." We returned above. The opera, now a house of chaos. The audience had fled in terror, the singers huddled in their chambers, the corridors echoing with fear. Durand sobbed softly in her dressing room, her maid in attendance. Delacroix stormed about declaring his innocence to all who would hear. La Fontaine stood silent, her expression unreadable, her eyes glinting with some secret fire. Through it all, Holmes moved like a conductor amid discord, noting each face, each word, each gesture. He calmed Fournier, reassured Durand, and quietly collected the fragments of a puzzle only he could see complete. When at last we stepped into the chill night, the boulevards deserted, Holmes strode swiftly, his coat flaring, his mind plainly racing. "Watson," he said quietly, "the curtain has fallen upon the phantom's last act. Tomorrow the explanation shall be given, and the assassin's name spoken aloud. Tonight, let us leave the stage to its shadows." I followed in silence, my heart heavy with suspense, for though Holmes' calm inspired confidence, the true face of the phantom remained hidden from me. The morning after the final performance dawned crisp and clear, as though Paris itself had been cleansed by the storm of fear that had swept it. Yet within the opera house, tension hung thick, for, though the assassin's hand had been glimpsed, his identity remained cloaked. Inspector Fournier, pale and trembling with fatigue, summoned us to his office with an urgency that brooked no delay. "Holmes," he said, his voice hoarse, "I beg you, tell me the truth. The phantom has slipped my grasp at every turn. The city demands an answer, and if I cannot give it, I'm undone. For pity's sake, speak." Holmes stood at the window, his lean form silhouetted against the pale light. He turned slowly, his grey eyes alight with that peculiar brilliance which signaled his triumph. "The truth, Inspector, is as plain as the score of an opera, once one learns to hear the theme beneath the variations. Permit me to lay before you the entire composition, from overture to finale." Fournier gestured weakly. "You have the floor, monsieur." Holmes seated himself, his long fingers steepled. "Consider first the dart, a missile loosed with uncanny precision, yet no hand seen. The stage bore a graze, downward in angle. At first one would suppose it cast from the gallery above, yet the rake of the stage, rising from pit to backdrop, deceives the eye. From the orchestra pit or vent below, a dart would appear to descend. Thus the phantom's first trick, to mislead us as to vantage." He glanced at me with a faint smile. "Watson, you recall my midnight study of the plans. The geometry revealed the truth. The assassin used the house itself as ally. Fournier muttered, but who could know its workings so intimately? Holmes lifted a finger. Patience. The second attempt provides the answer. Poison vapor released from a vial heated in the vents. Again, the house itself turned into weapon. Such ingenuity demands not only malice, but knowledge. Who but one long intimate with these passages, these hidden recesses, could so contrive? I leaned forward, my heart pounding. And the darts found in Delacroix's chamber. Holmes's lips curved. Ah, the most obvious clue, and therefore the most suspect. Too damning, too perfect. The assassin wished to paint the tenor as villain. He planted the evidence where it must be found. But no true marksman leaves his tools upon his dressing table. He rose, pacing now, his voice growing more forceful. Consider next the subtler signs. In the cellars, I found smears of grease such as singers use upon their faces. Beside them, the impression of a narrow shoe. A woman's shoe, Watson, not a man's. Later, in the vent, a splinter from a fan's rib, and in the dressing chamber of Mademoiselle Durand, a groove in the door frame where a thread had been tied, used to convey the threatening note. Each fragment pointed to the hand of one who moved freely between stage and cellar, whose attire betrayed her, whose jealousy burned fiercest. All eyes turned at once to Madame La Fontaine, seated stiffly at the far end of the chamber. Her lips tightened, but she did not flinch. Holmes's gaze fixed upon her with cold brilliance. Yes, madame. From the beginning you were the phantom's hand. Once the darling of Paris, eclipsed now by the nightingale Durand, your pride could not endure the fall. You wove your malice into clever snares. First the dart, then the vapor, then the planted evidence against Delacroix. Each attempt designed not only to kill, but to deceive. Yet vanity betrayed you. At the meeting in the manager's office, when I spoke of the assassin's two methods, you smiled, not with fear nor contempt, but with pride, the pride of an artist admiring her own work. That smile, madame, was the discordant note in the symphony. From that moment, the melody resolved. A gasp escaped Durand, who pressed her hand to her throat. Delacroix sprang to his feet with an oath of astonishment. Fournier half rose, his face purple with rage. La Fontaine rose slowly, her composure like a mask of marble. "And if it were true, monsieur," she said, her voice low, resonant, "if I did strike at the ingrate who stole my crown, would it not be justice? For years I reigned as queen of this house. Then she came, young, adored, and I was cast aside like a tattered costume. Do you think I would endure it meekly?" Her eyes blazed, her voice rising with tragic fervor. "You call it crime, I call it art. My art, monsieur, more cunning than any aria. To silence her was to restore the balance. If my methods were bold, it was because I was bold. I do not repent." Fournier's hand shook as he signaled his men. "Violette La Fontaine, you are under arrest for attempted murder." She drew herself to her full height, her eyes sweeping us with scorn. "Arrest me if you will. The world will forget her one day, as it forgets all singers, but they will not forget me." With that she was led away, her footsteps echoing in the corridor like the tolling of a funeral bell. The silence that followed was profound. At last Delacroix turned to Holmes, his face pale with relief. "You have cleared me, monsieur, though all believed me guilty. For that I thank you. But you have also shamed us all. What faith will Paris place in art when such malice lurked beneath its veil?" Durand, trembling but resolute, spoke softly. "No, monsieur. Art is greater than envy. If one voice is silenced, another shall rise. Music endures, though singers fall. That is its strength." Holmes inclined his head gravely. "Spoken truly, mademoiselle. May your song soar untroubled henceforth." That evening, as Holmes and I walked along the misty boulevard, I could not restrain my admiration. Holmes, once again you have plucked truth from shadows where no other eye could see. But tell me, when did you first suspect her?" He smiled faintly. "From the beginning, Watson. Envy is the most potent of motives, and her every word dripped with it. Yet suspicion is not proof. Only when she sought to frame Delacroix did she betray her hand. For the clever criminal often overreaches, painting too neat a portrait. It is in the excess, the flourish, that the truth lies hidden." "And the smile?" I asked. "Ah, the discordant note, Watson. Pride is the chink in the armor of genius. Vanity cannot resist applause, even the applause of its own cunning. That smile told me all." We walked on in silence for some moments, the lamps glowing dimly in the fog, the sound of hooves echoing like distant drums. At last, Holmes spoke again, his voice softer. "The world is quick to cry phantom when shadows confound it. But the phantom is always man, weak, envious, fallible. Strip away the veil, and reason stands triumphant. That, Watson, is satisfaction enough." I looked at him with admiration, as I had 100 times before. And once more I marveled that I, John H. Watson, should walk beside the keenest mind of our age, who had unmasked the assassin in the Paris Opera House and left the world to wonder at his brilliance.